Hey there everybody, it's Mark Crilley. I'm back with another How to Draw video. Today we're going to be learning about techniques for illustrating sunlight, the effect of sun pouring into a room such as this one. And I'm going to go ahead and just jump in using a bit of marker. The sunlight itself is something that's going to come a little bit later in the video, and the reason that I'm starting with the marker is to get a bunch of these shadows in place. I think it really is crucial. In a way, it's the contrast between the sunlight and the dark shadows. And if you understand that the light is supposed to be coming from the room, coming from the window, oh boy, I need more coffee, clearly, then you know that all the shadows are going to come into these areas that the sunlight would not really reach. So that actually comes down to your sort of understanding of how light works. And of course it can get quite complicated when you get into the realm of reflected sunlight and so forth. We're going to more or less keep things simple with this single source of sunlight. So you see me going to all of these desks and coloring in this opposite side, the side away from the window. And you know, rather than try to do all of this real time, I think it probably makes a lot of sense for me to speed through. Call in old man time-lapse. It's about time! And he's going to help me speed through this really quickly, and then we'll get maybe into a little bit more of general shading that's not so much related to the shadows as I'm doing right now. Alright, so you see I went in, I got my darks in place first, and then I came in with these sort of mid-tones, which I suppose do help a little bit with this idea of the light source and the shadow. But certainly more of that is handled by these dark areas that really come across as areas that are in shade. And what I'm going to be doing now is actually pulling out a pastel, which is really just sort of piece of chalk, kind of artistic level of chalk, and that's going to allow me to start doing some hopefully subtle additions of light and shadow. Now I know that in the end I want this to be very brightly lit, and I'm going to be using white gouache, this paint, which I find is best saved towards close to the end of the process so that you don't get other materials mixed up with it. But now is maybe a good time to come in with chalk, and I like chalk just because you can blend it like this and you can get these rather subtle gradations from dark to light. Now all of the stuff that I'm doing in this video could also be done digitally, for sure. And in fact, you know, as with anything done digitally, you have a lot of freedom to do things on different layers and undo things and so forth. As always, I suppose I sort of specialize in using the traditional materials. But heaven knows, when I'm creating my own comics, I do take advantage of digital effects to some degree, not maybe as much as some people do. I mean, a lot of people these days are actually drawing on tablets, and the entire process is done digitally. And so, in a way, there's no original art at the end of it. It all just exists as a file. Now, you can see me using this chalk to add shadow right here in this area of the bookshelf. Any one of these areas, like I have a feeling that the sunlight would come in and light up the floor close to the window, but not so close as you got farther away from the window. So I'm coming in with the chalk and sort of darkening in this area. And of course you can use more than one shade of chalk. I've got a sort of more yellowish colored one here that I'm going to use as we get a little closer to the window area. Now you've probably noticed that this paper that I'm working on is a sort of a tan color to begin with, and that's actually crucial for getting the paint to show up later on in the process. So if you do have access to some sort of toned paper like this, which you can get at art supply stores, I highly recommend that for when you have a job like this to illustrate sunlight and you're going to be using paint or whatever to make that paint pop and really show up, it certainly helps a lot if the paper that you're using to begin with has a kind of a tone on it. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and sort of finish up this part of adding pastel. I may come in with a black colored pencil to beef up some of these lines that are getting a little bit obscured by the chalk. But otherwise, the next thing we're going to be doing is coming back with the white gouache and letting it work its magic of having sunlight really start to pour in from this window. Alright, well, we've got all of the chalk done, mostly done anyway, and once I've completed that part of it, I feel like it is safe to bring out my beloved white gouache, an opaque white artist's paint, and adding just a little bit of water to sort of loosen it up a bit. I'm able to go in and start painting in this hopefully bright white sunlight within each one of these window panes. And, you know, I suppose you could do this in such a way that you see trees or something outside there. I'm going to really try to push it so that it's like blindingly bright, the sunlight that's pouring through. And so bright, in fact, that you just basically can't see anything outside. And that's just almost like a compositional thing, you know, that I've made part of the room filled with shadows, and then by making this all bright white, it sort of balances that out, or will hopefully create an effect of blindingly bright sunlight. Now, once I've got this in place, I can get into some of the details. I think one of the most interesting things that happens in a classroom situation like this is that the tops of the desks are sort of reflective surfaces. So maybe what I'll do is I'll hold off on doing that very last window pane there, and I'll just move right on to what I was talking about here with the way that this sunlight would reflect almost like in a mirror off of these desktops and be most intense in terms of the bright white just below, right, like the surface of a mirror. Just below the window. And this creates hopefully an interesting effect here in terms of not only is there sunlight pouring through, but we're seeing this sort of mirror-like effect of the sunlight illuminating some desktops more than others. Now what I'm going to do as my final little touch is to use white pastel, which, as was the case with the brown pastel, very easy to sort of smear around and get gradual effects. I'm going to be using that as my very final touch to really make it look like there's almost beams of light pouring through the window. And for me, that works best coming in at the tail end, because it will obscure the lines. You know, the white chalk is not completely opaque, but it definitely does sort of put a mist over these any of the line work that I've done near the window. So the window sill, for sure, that's an area that's going to get lit up pretty brightly. And I think also the sort of far edge of the window wall is going to get lit up. Now, as far as other objects and things within the room, I think that what I want to do is switch to a smaller brush for that, so that I can get a little more detail work going. And my feeling is that I may lightly illuminate the tops of these desks. But for now, I want you to just see me putting little highlights on the edges of the chairs, because it seems to me that's something that would certainly pick up light coming from the window like that. And then like this globe and certain objects up here, I think are definitely going to catch a little bit of light. But you can see by having started with this brown or tan paper to begin with, that certainly helps a lot in terms of getting these little white gouache highlights to pop. You know, if it was just a white piece of paper, this would be white on white, and it really wouldn't show up very well. And again, all of these different effects could certainly be achievable using digital techniques. The main thing is to understand the light source and have a sense of where these glints of light are going to occur, you know, in relation to the window. And yeah, that kind of gives you the basic idea of what I'm going to be doing. I'll go ahead and use time-lapse to finish off with these bits of white highlight, and then we're going to come back and use the white pastel to try to get that effect of sunbeams coming through the window. Okay, we're almost done with this, but I thought before I finish things, just to keep adding more and more mixed media, I'm bringing out a white colored pencil because we do have a chalkboard here, and it doesn't make sense for this to be anything other than white chalk on the chalkboard. So I'm just going to do this really quickly, cover this all over with white colored pencil. Then finally we'll come back and begin using the white pastel. And for the record, I gotta say, I have no idea what any of that means. I can barely add 2 and 2 friends, much less understand any stuff like that. But I'm going in now with this white pastel chalk, and this is going to give us that effect of sunlight coming in, almost blinding sunlight, obscuring some of the line work, especially in this area of, directly around the window. And I thought what I might do is actually use the chalk itself to create this feeling of beams, of actual beams of light that you can see pouring in and illuminating the room. Now, I don't want to just leave them all rough looking like that, so I do think I need to sort of lightly smear this just a little to get it, giving it that sunlight effect. Sunbeams pouring in the room. But you can see that it's only by beefing up all the darkness in this area that this sunlight effect can be achieved. You need both the dark and the light. It almost sounds like philosophy, doesn't it? In order to make this work. And that is more or less bringing us to the end of this. I don't want to overdo it in terms of having too much sunbeam action coming through this window. And maybe now is as good a time as any to stop. But you know me, I always like to end up my videos by thanking those who have helped me out by getting some of my books. Such as My Last Summer with Cass, my newest graphic novel, The Ultimate Book of Drawing Hands, which is my newest How to Draw book, and of course the Mastering Manga Series 1, 2, and 3, my books on how to draw in a manga style. Really am so very grateful to those of you who have purchased those books, and also want to remind anyone, or maybe it's your first time hearing about the fact that I've started a Patreon. I've put the link in the description of this video if you want to check that out, and of course many thanks if you will consider joining that. But I do think it is time for me to lay down this pencil. I want to thank you all for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I'll be back with another one real soon.